No one defended her, until I stood between the council and her children. The silent tribunal, the crystalline halls of Auralis Prime echoed with the cold formality of galactic justice. Commander Elias Brand adjusted his dress uniform as he approached the vast tribunal chamber, his boots clicking against floors that seemed to absorb all warmth. The human embassy had sent him here as an observer, nothing more than a diplomatic formality for what the Zilari considered an internal matter. The chamber stretched impossibly high, its walls embedded with pulsing veins of blue light that cast everything in an ethereal glow. At the center sat the judgment circle, 7 towering Zilari magistrates arranged in perfect symmetry, their elongated skulls gleaming like polished marble. Their eyes, large and luminous, tracked movement with mechanical precision. In the defendant's sphere stood Lunari, and Elias felt his breath catch. She was smaller than the other Zilari, her usually pristine white skin now bearing patches of stress-induced discoloration, purple bruises that marked her as emotionally compromised. Her hands trembled as she clutched a data pad containing what passed for her defense. Behind her, in a separate containment field, 2 children huddled together. They couldn't have been more than 10 standard years old, their features a striking blend of Zilari elegance and something else, something that made them dangerous in the eyes of the council. Their skin held traces of gold that shifted like liquid metal in the light, and their eyes burned with an inner fire that no pure Zilari possessed. The defendant stands accused of willful genetic contamination, announced Magistrate Vexhai, his voice resonating through bioacoustic amplifiers. She has harbored offspring of mixed heritage, specifically incorporating genetic material from the proscribed Zephyrian bloodline. Elias leaned forward in the observer's gallery. The Zephyrians, he'd read about them in classified reports. A species of energy manipulators who had been declared extinct after their homeworld was razed 3 centuries ago. Apparently, some had survived in hiding. Furthermore, Vexhai continued, the defendant has demonstrated emotional instability, a clear violation of Zilari behavioral protocols. She has refused mental recalibration and persists in exhibiting what humans term maternal attachment. The me. Word dripped with disdain. Around the chamber, other species representatives sat in stony silence. The Krillian delegation checked their chronometers. The Vorthon ambassador appeared to be sleeping. No one seemed to care that a mother was about to lose her children. Lunari stepped forward, her voice barely audible above the chamber's ambient hum. Honored magistrates, my children are not contamination. They are gifts. When my bondmate died defending our research station, I discovered I carried his legacy. The Zephyrian DNA was dormant, expressing only under extreme emotional stress. They pose no threat. Emotional stress, interrupted Magistrate Kolthara, is precisely the concern. You have demonstrated repeatedly that you cannot maintain proper psychological equilibrium. Your offspring carry unpredictable genetic markers. They must be separated for proper study and potential rehabilitation. Their children, Lunari's voice cracked, the first real emotion Elias had heard in the sterile proceedings. They need their mother. A ripple of uncomfortable silence swept the chamber. Several delegates shifted in their seats. The Zilari magistrates exchanged glances, quick, almost imperceptible communications through their bio-neural network. The defendant's outburst demonstrates our point exactly, Vexhai declared. Emotional volatility renders her unfit for child-rearing responsibilities. The offspring will be remanded to council custody for proper conditioning. Elias watched as Lunari collapsed to her knees, her datapad clattering to the floor. The children pressed against their containment field, their golden skin flaring brighter with distress. One of them, a girl with her mother's delicate features but eyes like burning stars, mouthed a single word, Mama. The tribunal chamber felt colder than deep space. Representatives from dozens of worlds sat watching as a family was torn apart by bureaucratic decree, and not one voice rose in protest. The Galactic Council prided itself on order, on logical governance free from the messy complications of emotion. But Elias Brand was human. And humans had never been particularly good at keeping quiet when they witnessed injustice. He stood up. Part 2. The Intervention. I invoke the right of humanitarian intervention under Article 7 of the Terran Galactic Accords. Elias's voice cut through the chamber like a plasma blade through silk. Every head turned toward the human observer gallery, where he stood with his hand raised in the formal gesture of legal challenge. The Zalari magistrate's luminous eyes narrowed to pinpoints of cold light. Commander Brand, Magistrate Vexhi's tone carried the bite of liquid nitrogen. You are here as an observer only. The Terran delegation has no standing in this internal matter. With respect, Magistrate, that's where you're wrong. Elias stepped down from the gallery, his boots echoing in the sudden silence. He'd memorized the relevant passages during his 3-day journey to Oralis Prime, never thinking he'd actually need them. Article 7 specifically grants any signatory species the right to intervene when fundamental humanitarian principles are violated. The chamber erupted in a buzz of translation programs and whispered conferences. In the defendant's sphere, Lunari looked up with something Elias had never seen in Zalari eyes before: hope. Magistrate Colthera leaned forward, her elongated fingers steepled. And what humanitarian violation do you perceive, human? The forcible separation of children from their primary caregiver without due cause. Elias pulled out his own datapad, fingers dancing across the holographic interface. Furthermore, I cite the Universal Codex on Sentient Rights, Section 12. No being shall be persecuted for genetic heritage beyond their control. These statutes do not apply, Vexhi began. They absolutely apply. Elias's voice carried the authority of someone who'd spent years negotiating in war zones. The Zalari Federation signed both documents. Your internal laws cannot supersede galactic humanitarian standards when it comes to the welfare of children. A new voice cut through the tension, melodic but sharp as crystal. The human speaks truth. From the Zephyrian memorial section, where no delegate should have been sitting, rose a figure that made the entire chamber gasp. Tall and graceful, with skin that shifted between silver and gold like liquid starlight, Ambassador Velthara of the Zephyrian remnant stepped into the light. Impossible, breathed Magistrate Vexhi. The Council declared your species extinct. The Council, Velthara replied with a smile that held no warmth, was misinformed. We who survived the cleansing have watched from the shadows as our children grew up in hiding, protected by brave souls like Lunari. The implications hit the chamber like a gravity wave. If the Zephyrians still existed, if they had been secretly monitoring the situation, then everything changed. Elias seized the moment. I call for a recess to review the new evidence, he announced, and I formally request that Earth be granted temporary guardianship of the defendant and her children pending a full review of this case. You overstep your authority, human, Colthera hissed. Do I? Elias pulled up another document on his pad. The Sanctuary Protocols, established after the Andromedan genocide. Any species threatened with forced separation based on genetic persecution can claim protection from any willing council member. Magistrate Vexhi's bio-neural implants flickered rapidly. He was accessing legal databases at superhuman speed. After several tense moments, his shoulders sagged almost imperceptibly. The human's interpretation is technically correct, he admitted. However, the Terran delegation must accept full responsibility for the subject's actions and any consequences thereof. Elias looked across the chamber at Lunari, who was staring at him with an expression of desperate gratitude. Her children had stopped crying, their golden skin settling to a warm amber glow as they began to hope. I accept full responsibility, Elias declared. On behalf of Earth and humanity, I offer sanctuary to Lunari and her children. The Zephyrian ambassador bowed slightly toward Elias, a gesture of respect between species. The remnant will not forget this kindness, Commander Brand. There are so few who stand for justice when it is difficult rather than convenient. As the magistrates conferred in rapid bio-neural bursts, Elias walked toward the defendant's sphere. Lunari met his eyes through the containment field, and for the first time since entering the chamber, she smiled. "Why?" she whispered in accented standard. "Why would you risk so much for strangers?" Elias thought of his own sister's children, back on Earth, of how he'd move worlds to protect them. Because, he said simply, it's the right thing to do. The political storm. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened 18 hours after Elias's intervention, and the human embassy was in chaos. Ambassador Catherine Reeves paced her office like a caged predator, her usually perfect diplomatic composure cracking under pressure. "Do you have any idea what you've done, Brand?" She waved a datapad filled with incoming communiques. "The Zolari are threatening to withdraw from 3 trade agreements. The Krillian Confederacy is demanding an explanation for our interference in internal justice. And don't get me started on the hegemony. They're calling this typical human emotionalism." Elias stood at attention, though everything in him wanted to check on Lunari and her children, currently housed in the embassy's secure wing. "With respect, Ambassador, I acted within the boundaries of established galactic law." "Barely." Reeves slapped the pad down on her desk. "You pulled out century-old protocols that nobody's invoked since the Rigel crisis. The Council's legal division is having fits trying to verify your citations." Through the office's panoramic window, Oralis Prime's 3 suns painted the sky in shades of amber and rose. Somewhere out there, the other Council species were deciding humanity's fate based on one man's split-second decision to do what was right. "Ma'am, if I may," Elias began. "No, you may not." Reeves turned toward the window, her reflection ghost-like in the smart glass. "The Zolari have filed a formal complaint. They're claiming we've harbored genetic criminals and violated Council sovereignty. If this goes badly, Commander, Earth could face sanctions, trade embargoes, even expulsion from the Council." The door chimed softly, and Lieutenant Commander Jessica Norton entered with a grim expression. "Ambassador, we've got bigger problems. Intel just intercepted Zephyrian communications. They're not just a remnant population. They're organized, potentially numbering in the millions, and they've been watching Council activities for decades." Reeves sank into her chair. Sweet, merciful. She looked up at Elias with something between fury and exhaustion. "You didn't just save one family, Brand. You may have triggered a first contact situation with a species we thought was extinct." Before Elias could respond, his comm unit buzzed with an urgent message. He glanced at it and felt his blood chill. "Ambassador, I need to check on our guests immediately." "What now?" "Lunari's children are sick. Their hybrid physiology is rejecting the embassy's atmosphere processors." The medical bay was a scene of controlled chaos when Elias arrived. Dr. Marcus Webb, the embassy's chief physician, worked frantically over 2 small forms while their mother held vigil beside the beds. Lunari's skin had gone nearly transparent, with stress, revealing the complex network of bioneural pathways beneath. "Their systems are designed for a specific atmospheric mixture," Webb explained without looking up. "The Zephyrian DNA requires trace amounts of theta radiation, something that was naturally present on their homeworld, but is filtered out by our standard life support." "How long do they have?" Elias asked. "Hours, maybe less. We need specialized equipment that doesn't exist outside of a Zolari medical facility, and they're not exactly inclined to help right now." Lunari's voice was barely a whisper. "I should have accepted separation, at least they would have lived." "No." Elias knelt beside her chair. "Your children are going to be fine. I promise you that." He activated his comm unit and opened a channel to the one person he hoped might help. "Ambassador Velthara, this is Commander Brand. I need to speak with you urgently." The response came immediately, tinged with concern. "I have been monitoring the situation, Commander. My people are already en route with the necessary medical equipment. Your people are here, on Oralis Prime? We have been here for many years, watching, waiting for the right moment to reveal ourselves. Your courageous stand has given us that moment." There was a pause. "However, I must warn you, the Council hardliners are mobilizing. They view our emergence as a threat to the established order. Some are calling for military action. Elias felt the weight of two civilizations settling on his shoulders. How much time do we have? The emergency session begins in 4 hours. The children will recover fully with our treatment, but Commander, Velthara's voice carried an edge of steel. Be prepared to defend more than just one family. You may need to defend the right of extinct species to return from the shadows. As if summoned by her words, Ambassador Reeves's voice echoed through the medical bay's comm system. All senior staff to the briefing room immediately. We've just received word that 17 previously unknown Zephyrian ships have entered Oralis Prime's system. The Council is calling an emergency vote on humanity's continued membership. Elias looked down at the two children, their breathing steadying as Zephyrian medical nanites worked to stabilize their systems. They were beautiful, these hybrid beings, living proof that different species could not only coexist, but create something new and wonderful together. Whatever happens, he told Lunari quietly, they're going to be safe. I give you my word. She reached out and took his hand, the first time he'd ever seen a Zeleri initiate physical contact with an alien. You have already given us more than we dared hope for, she said. Now we must see if your species is ready to face the consequences of your compassion. Part 4. The Fracture. The council chamber had been transformed into something resembling a war tribunal. Emergency lighting cast harsh shadows across faces that had grown grim with the weight of momentous decisions. 17 Zephyrian vessels hung in perfect formation beyond the station's viewports, their hull plates shifting between silver and gold like living things. Elias stood in the defendant's dock, a bitter irony that wasn't lost on him. Beside him, Ambassador Reeves maintained her diplomatic mask, but he could see the tension in her clenched jaw. They were no longer observers. Humanity itself was on trial. The charges are severe, announced Prime Magistrate Zorandis, the highest-ranking Zelari in the council. Her ancient voice carried the weight of 3 centuries. Violation of council sovereignty, harboring of prohibited genetic materials, conspiracy with a presumed extinct species to deceive the galactic community. From the gallery, Velthara spoke with the fluid grace of her people. Honorable magistrates, my species was not extinct. We were driven into hiding by council policies that classified our very existence as illegal. We preserved ourselves in secret, hoping for a day when we might emerge without fear of extermination. You were classified as extinct for good reason, rumbled Councillor Morteth of the hegemony, his crystalline exoskeleton fracturing light into prismatic rainbows. The Zephyrian energy manipulation abilities were deemed too dangerous for unrestricted development. By whose authority? Elias stepped forward, drawing all attention to himself. The Council's mandate is to preserve peace and promote cooperation between species. When did it become about genetic purity and the suppression of natural evolution? The chamber erupted in a cacophony of alien languages and translation errors. Through the chaos, Elias caught sight of Lunari in the medical observation deck, her children now stable but still weak. She watched the proceedings with the desperate attention of someone whose entire world hung in the balance. Magistrate Vexhai rose from his seat, bioneural implants flickering with contained rage. The human speaks of evolution while ignoring the chaos that unchecked genetic mixing can cause. The Zephyrian abilities, combined with other species' traits, could produce unpredictable and potentially catastrophic results. Or, Velthara interjected, smoothly, they could produce the next stage of galactic civilization. Lunari's children represent hope, not horror. They are living proof that our species can create something greater than the sum of our parts. Commander Jessica Norton leaned over to whisper in Reeves's ear, and the ambassador's face went pale. She stood abruptly. Prime Magistrate, I request an immediate recess. We've just received intelligence that affects the entire council. What intelligence? Zorandis demanded. Norton activated a holographic display that filled the chamber's center. A star map appeared, showing the outer rim territories in alarming detail. Red markers indicated dozens of previously unknown installations. Long-range reconnaissance has detected massive military buildups in 3 separate sectors, Norton announced. The Void Hunters are massing their fleets. Our xenobiological experts believe they're preparing for another expansion wave. The Void Hunters, mechanical intelligences that consumed organic life to fuel their endless reproduction. The Council had fought them to a standstill decades ago, but at tremendous cost. If they were returning, how does this relate to the current proceedings? Asked Councillor Vexhai. Elias saw the connection immediately. They're coming for the genetic diversity. The Void Hunters adapt by consuming and analyzing biological data. A species with energy manipulation abilities, especially one with hybrid genetic variants, would be invaluable to their war machine. Velthara's expression hardened, which is precisely why my people have remained hidden. We knew this day would come. Are you suggesting, Zorandis said slowly, that the Zephyrian remnant has been preparing for renewed hostilities? I'm suggesting, Velthara replied, that we've spent 3 centuries developing our abilities specifically to fight an enemy that consumes everything it touches. Our hybrid children aren't genetic contamination. They're the next generation of defenders. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Through the viewports, the Zephyrian ships adjusted their formation, and for the first time, their true nature became apparent. They weren't just vessels, they were living constructs grown rather than built, pulsing with bioelectric energy that could punch through Void Hunter armor. The Council faces a choice, Elias said, his voice carrying to every corner of the vast chamber. We can continue to debate genetic purity while an implacable enemy masses on our borders, or we can embrace the diversity that makes us strong. Lunari's children aren't the problem. They might be the solution. Magistrate Colthera leaned forward, her luminous eyes fixed on the star map. What are you proposing, human? Full recognition of Zephyrian sovereignty, immediate integration of their defensive capabilities with Council fleets, and an end to genetic persecution policies that force our allies to hide in the shadows. In exchange for what? Zorandis asked. Velthara stood, her form seeming to glow with inner light. In exchange for the survival of organic life in this galaxy, the Void Hunters return in 6 months. When they do, you'll need every advantage you can get. As if summoned by her words, alarms began blaring throughout the station. A communications officer's voice echoed through the chamber. Emergency alert. Void Hunter scout ships detected in the Kepler Nebula. All military vessels to battle stations. The trial had become irrelevant in the span of seconds. The real judgment would come from an enemy that cared nothing for politics or genetic purity. Only the complete consumption of everything they held dear. Elias looked up at Lunari and her children, then back at the assembled council. The question isn't whether humanity overstepped its bounds, he said quietly. The question is whether we're brave enough to step beyond them when survival demands it. The stand 6 months later, the combined fleets of 3 galaxies hung in formation above the burning remnants of the Vega system. The Void Hunters had come as promised, their mechanical swarms blotting out stars with their sheer numbers. But they hadn't counted on the alliance that desperation and hope had forged. Commander Elias Brand stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, no longer a diplomatic observer, but a fleet coordinator in humanity's greatest battle. Through the main viewer, he watched as impossible ships danced through space, Zephyrian bioconstructs that bent energy like sculptors working clay, their hybrid crews channeling power that could crack moons. Energy spike detected in Sector 7, called Lieutenant Torres from the sensor station. Looks like another Hunter Hive ship. Zephyrian Wing Echo, you're clear to engage, Elias transmitted. On the tactical display, 12 ships peeled away from the main formation, their hulls shifting from silver to brilliant gold as they charged their weapons. Leading them was the ZRS Harmony, a name that would have been impossible to imagine a year ago. At its helm sat Lunari, her children beside her at dual navigation stations. The hybrid twins had grown in the month since the trial, their abilities blossoming under careful training. Now they served as living conduits between organic intuition and energy manipulation. Contact in 30 seconds, came Lunari's voice over the comm. calm despite the magnitude of what they faced. "Children, prepare for resonance cascade. Ready, Mother?" They replied in unison, their voices harmonizing in ways that still gave Elias chills. The Void Hunter hive ship was a nightmare of black metal and consuming hunger. Easily the size of a small moon, its weapon ports glowed with the stolen energy of a dozen consumed worlds. Against it, the Zephyrian ships looked like glowing insects. Then the twins began to sing. It wasn't sound in any conventional sense. It was mathematics made manifest, physics bent to the will of hybrid consciousness. The space around the hive ship began to warp, energy cascading in impossible directions. The great mechanical beast's weapons fired, but the beams curved back on themselves, tearing through its own armor. "Impossible," breathed Captain Sarah Mitchell from her position at the tactical station. "They're making it destroy itself." "Not destroy," Elias corrected, watching the energy patterns with growing understanding. "Transform. They're converting its consumed energy back into its original forms." As if to prove his point, the hive ship's hull began to crack, not with destruction but with rebirth. Plants began growing from the metal seams. Ecosystems from worlds the hunters had devoured, restored by hybrid consciousness that could reach across space and time to remember what had been lost. The transformation rippled outward through the hunter fleet. Ships that had consumed entire civilizations found themselves hosting gardens. Mechanical intelligence designed for endless hunger discovered the concept of enough. On the Defiance's bridge, communications came alive with reports from across the battle zone. The tide was turning, not through superior firepower, but through something the Void Hunters had never encountered: the power to transform consumption into creation. "Commander Brand," came Ambassador Reeves's voice from the diplomatic vessel Eclipse. "The Hunter Collective is attempting to communicate. They're requesting terms." Terms. Elias almost laughed at the impossibility of it. 6 months ago, he'd stood in a tribunal defending one alien mother's right to raise her children. Now those same children were teaching mechanical intelligences the difference between surviving and living. "Patch me through to the collective," he ordered. The view screen shifted to show something that defied description, a writhing mass of mechanical and organic components that pulsed with confused awareness. When it spoke, its voice was like the grinding of gears learning to whisper. "We do not understand. Your offspring change us, make us less, more, different. They're making you alive." Elias replied simply. "The question is, what do you want to do with that life?" The pause stretched for eons measured in nanoseconds. Around them, the battle had transformed into something unprecedented. Void Hunter ships working alongside Council vessels to repair the damage they had caused. Their crews now hybrid beings themselves, part machine efficiency and part organic compassion. "We want," the collective's voice grew stronger, more individual, "to build instead of consume, to create instead of destroy, but we do not know how." Velthara's image appeared in a secondary screen, her expression serene. "Then, learn. As we learn to hide and survive, as the Council learned to trust despite fear, as humans learned to stand for others even when it meant standing alone." Elias looked around the bridge at faces that represented a dozen species, all working together, toward something none of them could have imagined alone. In the tactical display, Lunari's ship moved through the transformed fleet like a conductor guiding an orchestra, her children's voices still weaving harmony from chaos. "Ambassador Reeves," he said quietly, "I think it's time to convene another council session. We're going to need a bigger table." Later, in the quiet of his quarters, Elias received a private message from Lunari. The video showed her family together on the observation deck of their ship, her children grown tall and confident, their golden skin now bearing patterns that shifted like living constellations. "Commander," she said, her voice carrying the weight of gratitude that spanned galaxies, "I wanted you to know. The Council has officially designated hybrid children as bridges between stars. They're no longer seen as contamination, but as connection, as hope. She paused, and one of her children stepped into frame. The girl who had once mouthed "Mama" through a containment field. "Thank you," the child said in perfect standard, her voice carrying harmonics that spoke of infinite possibility, "for teaching us that family isn't about the purity of your blood. It's about the courage to stand for those you love." As the message ended, Elias looked out at the stars, where ships from 100 worlds now worked together to heal the scars of war. He thought about that day in the tribunal, when he'd stood up because it was the right thing to do. Sometimes, he reflected, the smallest acts of courage create the largest changes, and sometimes defending one family means defending the very future of what family can become.